So question number 1, and we're going to start with Molly on an answer for this one. Okay, so and I want to say really quick, we're co-hosting this event with the NAACP Lawrence Branch and the League of Women Voters, along with Women for Kansas. So keep that in mind when you think about your answers. Okay, so with the war on diversity, equity, and inclusion and the whitewashing of history at the state and federal level, how will you ensure equity in student achievement, opportunity, discipline, as well as curriculum, human resources, and the larger operations of USD 497? So let me read that one more time. So with the war on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the whitewashing of history at the state and federal level, how will you ensure equity in student achievement, opportunity, discipline, as well as curriculum, human resources, and the larger operations of USD 497? Okay, so Molly, why don't you start us off?
Hi, I'm Molly Starr. Go with she, her pronoun.
Okay, we're gonna have to use that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We'll pass. I will do the work for you. Go ahead.
My name is Molly Starr. I use she, her pronouns. So the question is about achieving appropriate and equitable and closing achievement gaps based on wars on the DEI process. I think there's currently with the school board a lot of data about acquiring achievement gaps that are noted to be closed. At one of the recent school board meetings, there was mention of Native Americans, for example, having lower graduation rates and things like that. So in terms of data, I think we have that data. I think the way to close that is to have better representation in our staffing, which is
Speak up, please.
Yeah, just put the microphone closer. Because you got to be really close.
I think
There you go.
that staffing and having representation for students is very important, and I think that USD 497 could do a better job of that. I think there are intents to do that. While we have a $1,000 signing bonus for people who are signing on to teach with us, I think that could be an enticing opportunity to get a more diverse staff. I think when students see themselves represented in the staff and where they go to school, that would do a lot for making sure that people of all socioeconomics and racial diversity had representation. I think the next item was, there was before discipline.
Yeah, discipline,
Opportunities.
curriculum.
Okay, so opportunities I think also can be improved with staffing so that each child or even staff member, I guess, had better opportunities. Often my answer is that communication will help, but if people are unable to communicate because there's not someone that they feel like they can trust, representation in staff would help. Discipline is an interesting question, and I know that in our middle schools, we have seen data about discipline not being especially equitable. I think we should look into more data about that, but that might not be data that may be something that has to be looked into with more qualitative answers to those solutions because they seem personal. HR, I think we're doing a better job with having representation with our parent square that is translatable at least. I know that's trouble as well.
All right, Pam. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pam Shaw. No one's ever accused me of not being able to be heard, so hopefully those of you in the back. Yeah, cool. Okay. I am a pediatrician and also an educator, and I work at the Med Center in Kansas City. And we've gone through a number of things at that level. I know it's higher than K-12, but it also is applicable. That has to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We believe in holistic admissions to medical school, which means that there are certain characteristics of medical school applicants that make them better physicians. And we look at this holistically without the labels of diversity, equity, inclusion, but it includes all of those factors. And I believe that's really what we need to think about is belonging. The children need to feel like they belong. The teachers need to feel like they belong. The staff needs to feel like they belong. And part of it is set, the tone is set at the school board level, that these things are important to the people that are on the school board, and it's important that it trickles down then to those who work in the district as well. So it's, for me, it really is how we treat children, how we treat each other, and really how we model the way, if you will, to make sure that we are inclusive, and we can still use that word, and that we also have a equal chance for every child to succeed. And to do that, we have to individualize for each child. In some cases, there are special needs kids who need more. There are lots of examples of how children can succeed. I am an example of a public school person who was never told when she was in public school she could be a physician because I was a woman. And I feel that we have to be able to tell people they can be what they dream to be, and show them that, again, it's possible. Anything is possible. Matt?
Can you all hear me okay?
Uh-huh.
Excellent, thank you. I always taught the kids, don't start a paper with a quote unless it's a really good one. But I am going to use a quote here. I had an instructor when I was in my education program at KU named Aaron Reif, and he said that education and public schools specifically are the one American institution that everybody has to pass through, right? You're not always in the adult world going to interact with an influencer or a professional athlete, a comedian, an engineer, depending on what your scope may be. But I think the beauty of our schools is that we encounter people from all walks of life, that socialization that we introduce kids to very early on, all the way through graduation, right? For some of them, that'll be the last time that they're around people that don't look like them, that don't sound like them, that don't think like them. And that's something pretty sacred that needs to be preserved. So the question here about achievement, opportunity, HR discipline, and ops. We live in a extremely difficult time when these words can be trigger words for conflict around the state, around the federal government, the state house, everywhere else. So I think there's a couple of things that we do really well. I think that we are fortunate to have had a board that has codified equity processes and beliefs into our district policy. I don't pretend to understand why we're not in the same sites that 3 or 4 other districts around the state are now for having those kinds of policies, but I think that was a very proactive move by our board that we should appreciate. I think in terms of representation, as Molly so expertly put it, there is an academy in the state of Kansas where schools sign up and have their own students, shadow and train to be teachers before they enter higher education. There were, I believe last year, it's been a while since I talked to the guy in there, but I believe there was around 30 students or so from Olathe that participated in that program from all walks of life. Lawrence had 2 or 3. I think that we can do a better job of raising our own, especially students that, haven't typically pursued that field, or families that haven't typically pursued that field. I think that would be an awesome way to home grow the idea of equity and belonging within our school district. In terms of discipline, I would also echo what Molly said, that we have data. I was a school administrator, the ideas about who was being suspended, who was being not targeted, but who was being identified for special education services, who was being targeted for discipline versus other students. We know who those students tend to be, right? We know who what those students tend to look like. And yet, was that 3 minutes? All right. I had more.
Let me take that neighbors.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you guys don't mind. When talking about these things, it's a little emotional, and I need to move when I vote. Can everyone hear me without the microphone?
Please, you, Mike. It's good for me.
Okay. Oh, yeah, no problem. So first, I want to thank Women for Kansas, the League of Women Voters, and the NAACP institutions that were all founded on the understanding that rights are not given, they are fought for, and that fight is never ending. And if I could have one word to sum up how I would do it, it would be fight. We need to teach our kids resilience, right? We need to they need to understand, like, and mind you, all the things that we're talking about now, like the war on DEI and whitewashing history, that's a war from outside looking in. Our community will never be ready to win that fight unless within our walls we are healthy. And right now, Lawrence, Kansas has lost 3 times the rate of students of any of the surrounding school districts. The data does not support us having lost that much. There's a reason. The children that did stay miss nearly twice as much school. The average student misses 3 weeks of school. How can we provide safety for children that aren't there? And we have unmet sub-needs at a rate that is 1,000 times worse than the worst on record prior to the fall of 2018. Every one of these trends started before COVID, and they scream to me of a community that has lost faith in a public institution that it has always supported. Lawrence is a community of educators, even those that don't teach here. We draw people like that. And for some reason, something has happened in our schools that our community has lost that faith. And that's the first step we need to make, is we need to get ourselves right. If we are strong within the walls, then we can defend the walls from those that would come from the outside. But the Supreme Court's already ruled, I can't, as a school board member, ban a book for thematic content, because children have a First Amendment right to access information. Now, if we are getting our things right, we can stand with them and fight for that First Amendment right of their access to an accurate representation of our history. But right now, the kids are fighting the school district for their First Amendment rights. We're in court against our own students because they want to be able to have the right that all of the rest of it is founded on, protected. But we have to fight to protect that, right? They're not just going to give it to us, and that fight is going to end in a court. And so we need to be prepared to have accurate behavior reporting so that we can appropriately reflect the realities of our children. I think we should have behavior reporting systems that the children can access so that we can show them we want to hear their voice. And when someone finds them, when they are alone, they can report to us and we can come running. Because that's the deal. There is a fight out there to be had, but we got to come running to it. And right now we are cowering.
Thank you. So I am really glad that this is the first question, because honestly, these bigger issues of what do we want our community to be, what do we want our state to be, what do we want our nation to be, are exactly the issues that are at stake right now when we are talking about public education. It is all at stake, it is all on the line, and make no mistake, there are people out there who would like to see us fail at the national level, at the state level, and even in our community. One of the things that I think it's really important to remember is that we have to make sure that we are being transparent and honest about the state of things. So I will always have receipts for the things that I say to the community about the state of our public schools and the data. I do think it is a strength of our district that we rely on data and we collect good data, and we do a good job of trying to make the best decisions that we can with that data and in light of the circumstances that face us. And that is true of all of the issues that are encompassed in this question around discipline, around hiring, around student achievement. We dive deep and we look at that data and then we adjust and try to do better, because ultimately my biggest responsibility is to do the best I can do for every single child that is in our public schools, regardless of their background, regardless of who they are, where they come from. That is my duty as a board member, and I take that very seriously. Our community expects that of us, and I think that it is a strength of Lawrence Public Schools and our community that we have been leading in this way for many years in Kansas. I work professionally as an advocate for public schools across the state. I see a lot of places where communities and their boards are not having this discussion at all. I will always stand up and do what's right for kids when it comes to access to curriculum materials and accurate history and books. I will fight against censorship. I think that the work that we have done as a district, that I have done as a member of the policy committee, with the administration, with my colleague Kelly Jones, is a statement to how important we think that work is, and we will continue to do that work. An executive order is nothing but a piece of guidance about what the administration thinks the law ought to be. That does not mean that we have to react to it, and I'm unafraid to stand up for what is right for our kids, and I will continue doing that in another term on this board. Thank you so much.
Can you hand it to Kelly? Yeah, thank you.
Hello, my name is Kelly Jones, and I am also very excited that this is the question that we're talking about, because I do think it's central to the work that we do on the board. I did participate with Shannon and our good friend Melissa Johnson, who is now Melissa Ross, in writing the district's equity policy. And I just want to, just to center, I'll just say that it includes that there will be culturally responsive curricula. The strategy shall include the development, implementation, and ongoing review of culturally sustaining teaching and learning practices and curriculum, sustained via continuous professional learning opportunities. And the strategy shall include social emotional learning frameworks and behavioral health approaches that connect to equity and culturally sustained classrooms practices, and protect students' dignity and discipline. That's the charge from the board. That's the what we write is our charge. Then we need to look and see, are we being successful at that? And my vision in writing that, in some places where I think we're having successes, we, in the face of our not so dear president's interpretation on February around the dear colleague letters that directed us that we needed to get rid of all things DEI. We instead buckled down and said we are continuing to hold a position that is dedicated to equity. We are continuing to hold positions that are dedicated to family engagement. So when we drafted that policy, we made sure that, like we hear from folks in the disability community that are advocates, that we are not writing those policies without the voices of those that it represents. So that nothing about us without us, essentially. So we engaged in a participatory decision-making policy practice. So we worked with the communities to gather what is the best direction the board should be going in. And where we've had some successes, you can see in Cordley Elementary, when the students are out marching for the rights of folks of color and their Black and brown students, and marching for the rights of LGBTQ individuals in our community. That to me is a success. But as Shannon said, we also need to be looking to see what does the data tell us around educational opportunities. So are our students of color, for example, represented within our Jayhawk Blueprint? We have 2,000 students that are taking college credits at the high school level over the last 6 years, and we need to make sure who is in there and who is taking those classes. Do they represent our full body? We are a predominantly white district, but over 40% of our students are students of color, and we need to make sure that the work that we're doing at the board level takes that into account. As an individual in my work, I am certainly facing at the university level calls to scrub all things pertaining to DEI from our, well, Lois says I have to stop, but I could not.
I got it.
Yeah, okay, great.
Well, I'll start and be, as I learned in college, I'll be brief and succinct.
Thank you.
And try to be,
Closer to now, yeah.
oh gosh. I'll try to be succinct and to the point.
Yeah.
For me, I grew up, I was raised early, my early childhood was in deep south in Missouri, in cotton country. So when we talk about education, for me, education is equity. Education is, that's what it's about. I've had a discussion with newspapers as a board member, and my discussion was with them about when are you going to end DEI? Why do you still have an equity council? And my comment was, well, here in Lawrence, we do one thing well. We follow the law. The president's decree is not the law. That when we deal with our students of color, it is really about dignity and treating each child, each family with dignity. I spent 7 years of my early professional life as a child protection worker. And I still see families I have dealt with on the street today. And even today, I treat them with that dignity. Because the reality is, our education is that we should learn that everyone has an innate dignity, an inert to themselves. And in education, it's very important that we treat all students that way. I currently and have served on the Equity Council in the district for, probably a good 20, 30 years. And pushing the district to stay true to that ideal of true equity, where how people move on in our society is really about equity. It's not about black, white, green, or yellow. It's about the simple understanding that everyone deserves the same things and that we should all work to that end. So basically, here in Lawrence School District, and my involvement has been over probably about 50 years, either as a parent or as a school board member or as a professional working within the district, is that I always press for that. Treat people with dignity, and remember, education is dignity. It gives people that dignity.
All right, Kelly, you're going to be first on this next one. Okay, so here's our next question. So top of mind for many in a variety of contexts is safety in our schools for both students and employees. What are your priorities in crafting safety and security policies for this district? So let me read that again. I'm a teacher. They're writing. Let's read it again. Top of mind for many in a variety of contexts is safety in our schools for both students and employees. What are your priorities in crafting safety and security policies for this district? So Kelly, we'll start with you.
I want to tell you a quick story. When Dr. Lewis was exiting the district, one of the questions that I heard Erica Hill ask him was, what is the thing that keeps you up at night? And he said, student safety. The safety of the employees and the people in this district. And I will tell you as a board member, that keeps me up at night. When we get prompts that tell us that we are looking at whether or not there is a gun violence in our school on a regular basis now, or when I, as a mental health professional, have deep concerns about the rates of suicide and mental health concerns in our district, that for me, this piece about like what is it that we do around safety is paramount to the work that we do as educators and as people on the board. So there are laws in which we have to follow pertaining to safety, but I want to just mention as it relates to like background checks, as it relates to making sure our buildings are safe and secure, as it relates to accounting for that through procedures where we are monitored. Those legal pieces we definitely are looking at and are paying close attention to. I know that this community right now has had hugely been impacted by events in our elementary education buildings, and I don't want to go around not mentioning that because that I think is a really important thing to talk about and be honest about. For me, as somebody who worked in domestic violence and intimate partner violence work, that's how I started my career. This was devastating to know, and I understand that the impacts of this are long-standing for our community. So how do we respond to the parents and the students, and to not just think about what do we do preventively, but what do we do when we need to react and respond to those cases to take care of our communities when they experience something like we have seen. And I'll say that for my role on the board, I know if you pay attention, and I'm assuming that you all are here listening to school board members, you pay attention. I have certainly been very public in my advocacy around creating safe spaces for our district and our staff, but also the other space where this happens is listening to teachers and students about where it is that they have experienced the most feelings of being not safe. So I've done that at the negotiations table for the last 7 years, listening to teachers to say, these are the needs we have around safety. How are you responding? We have held multiple forums with students to hear directly from them. What are the spaces where we can do better to account for your experience in this district? It is a priority for the board, it is a priority for the administration, and it is an area where you are constantly doing improvement. And like Dr. Lewis, I know it is for Dr. Swift what keeps her up at night. So I appreciate this question, thank you.
Okay, Shannon, go ahead.
Okay, so this is the moment where I would really like to say ditto, because I agree with all the things Kelly just said, and she did a really good job of talking about so many of the different ways that we, as board members, worry about these things, that we have to take account of them when we are at the board table and working with our administration. I do want to say to the community that absolutely student safety and staff safety is absolutely a huge priority for me as a board member. And I always want to ensure that I am available to listen and learn from our staff and our community when they don't perceive that we have met that expectation. That is a really important component of being a board member, is being willing to listen and respond when things don't appear to have gone the way that people expect them to. That being said, this is a continuous improvement process. We are always looking at these issues in many different ways. Some of the things that we have done over the years in this area, our staff came to us and said we needed to have some improvements made to our bullying policies around staff. We did that work, I did that work, and helped draft policy and adopt policy as a board member. We had students come to us and say, the dress code that we have in our schools as women students make us feel unsafe, because it makes us feel scrutinized, and we're held to a different standard. Kelly and I led an effort to completely rewrite that policy. We've actually become a model at the state and national level for how to do equitable, inclusive policy work that protects the safety and dignity of students. We've done work on the facility side in our district. That's something I've been working on very intensively since 2011. Actually, I've been on the board for almost 14 and a half years now. We have invested heavily in improving the physical safety of our buildings. We don't want our buildings, at least I don't as a board member, I don't want our schools to feel like prisons. Oftentimes when something goes wrong, that's everybody's first response, is you gotta lock it down, you gotta harden every space, you gotta do all these things. Our schools should not feel like that. Our schools should be welcoming places for kids where they have the opportunity to build meaningful relationships with our staff. That actually is a really important component of students' safety as well, and staff safety, is the ability for our kids and our staff to build those relationships so that there's always an adult that a student feels that they can go to with something. But we have done that work in hardening the envelopes of our building so that they are safe and can allow that work to happen on the inside. So I will continue to support all of those efforts and lead changes to policy where they are called for, to ensure that we are doing everything we can to support our safety of our students and our staff in our buildings. Thank you very much.
Get it up there. Okay. The issue of student safety and safety of our staff is primary importance to me. The reality is I spent 40 years of my professional career in child welfare dealing with issues around families and child safety. When I look at this and I look at where the district is, I think we're in a good place as far as doing those things in our buildings and in our system that we're required to do. My issues usually come when you lock things down, you lose a part of that safety for me. What kids often need is a three-pronged approach. You know the old saying, it takes a village to raise a kid. That means more than, it's the school's responsibility to keep kids safe. It's more than, it's the parents' responsibility to keep kids safe. And the reality is, it's a three-pronged responsibility. It's the responsibility of our communities, it's the responsibility of our schools, it's a responsibility of parents. My belief is that in order for us to truly keep kids safe, we need community and families more involved in education, more than just paying taxes. It's about having extra eyes on what's going on in our schools. It's about having extra people able to see what's happening around education. So to me, when we talk about safety of staff, it comes down to that point, that kids have to believe that in order to be safe, it is more than one group's responsibility to take care of that issue. To me, it takes families, it takes the school, and it takes our community. When I grew up, the community was the center point. The center point of the community was schools. That we did everything in the school. You had a program, everyone in the community went to the program. So, and we didn't have some of the things that we have now happening in our schools. The reality is, for my vision, would be to open up more so the community can actually experience the great educational job that our staff does. To be more collaborative with families and communities.
Thank you. Interestingly enough, right before this question was asked, I had written down the question on my paper, what good is a policy? Before the IRS was created, there was tax law that said you had to pay income tax. Not a lot of people did it, right? Enforcement is the key for any policy. So real quick, I think that the people most capable of determining what is bad behavior in a classroom and how to teach it away is teachers. So I believe that my role, the best way I can support safety in our schools is by piloting a volunteer program. So I have experience in our classrooms working as a para with children with behavior issues, in resource rooms, etc. You guys can tell when I stand up, I'm a large dude, right? It's easier sometimes for me to manage a space than others. I would like to volunteer to support staff that are struggling, whether it's new teachers or teachers that are working with new populations of kiddos. We need decision makers that have actually done the work. I was talking to somebody the other day, I asked them, what is the thing that would create the culture shift to help us retain teachers? And their answer was that we need to allow a humbling moment, to be willing to experience the discomfort of the dysfunction in our classrooms so that we can acknowledge them. You can only solve a problem that you can look at in the eye. I used to always tell my kids that, and then I realized, like in old mythology, you can actually disarm the powers of a demon by calling it by its name. That's why Rumpelstiltskin can't take off with their kid after they say their name, right? We have to be able to look at this problem in the eye, and I can't just take words for it and hope that I'm hearing from the right people. We need decision makers. My daughter, she started a conversation with me about how she thought kindergartners and first graders shouldn't be on the ground floor in case of a school shooter. And we started talking about who should be on the ground floor, the people most responsible for the policies we're making. If I make a policy, I'm telling teachers, you gotta do this thing the way I think should be done. But they know better than me. I need to be there to support their decision making. We need admin that understands, they call it the ESC, the Educational Support Center, because the whole purpose of the thing is to support our educators. But how are we doing that when we're removed from them? I want in this pilot program, I saw a kid at the grocery store who I used to coach, who's now a coach, who has to spend $500 a month on practice facilities. What if we could log my time and I could earn credits towards facility fees so youth coaches and nonprofits that support kids could come in and have cheaper access to that space, making their programming more accessible to kids, and then people are chasing their passions in our schools on a Saturday. They're going to be a hell of a lot more likely to show up on time on Monday. We need to get into the problem, and we need to center in the classroom. Our teachers know better than our policymakers.
Okay, Pam, you're next.
Thank you very much. As a pediatrician, this is a subject that hits very close to home. Every time that there is a school shooting, my Parent Academy, the American Academy of Pediatrics, comes out with data. We have the data. We know what will make it safer for children in schools. And we know that that has to do with gun storage. That also has to do with guns should not be close to ammunition. The data is there. We just are not, as a country, doing what we need to save our children and our teachers and our staff who are in the schools, because this is happening over and over again. I really thought after Sandy Hook that we would do something. We haven't. It continues on and on. And the reality is, it's not just about the guns, it is about mental health also. And we have to address the mental health issues that are going on in the school. There are great models out there of co-locations of social workers or counselors in the school with the children to help those children who really need those. We have to have the resources to be able to do that, because we know kids spend their time at school. That's where they should be seen and helped under those circumstances. We also need the parents to be involved and the community to be involved. There is no reason for anyone to have an AK-47. It is not a hunting rifle. I have hunted. I'm not here to take away your guns, but there's no need for those guns to be in our country. And there are more guns than there are people in our country. It's a problem that we have to deal with as a community. I get really ranty about this, so I apologize for that. But I do want to bring up one more safety issue that is looming right now, and that is vaccinations of our children. This is a safety issue for staff. This is a safety issue for teachers. This is a safety issue for our children. And you have the freedom to not immunize your child. That is your choice. But when it affects my child, it's no longer your choice. When it affects the immunocompromised teacher, it's no longer your choice. So this is a safety issue that I know a lot about. I've dealt a lot with this kind of thing, and this is the kind of thing I want to work on in the community to help with education, to help with moving these issues forward, because our children should be safe at school. It should be safe for them to be healthy. It should also be safe for them to not be shot. And we have some big work to do, and I'm willing to take that on.
Okay, so Ty said that we were supposed to be very specific with our answers, and perhaps I was too specific in the first answer, but I'm going to do the same thing again. I think there are many different elements of safety that we should be talking about. So we've talked about architectural solutions for safety in terms of gun violence. That's something that I'm interested in, like how many exits are there? How usable is this window? I think there are other safety issues like background checks. Are we doing enough background checks for current staff? California has double background checks. Right now, I think we are doing it for new staff. Similarly, our sexual assault policy, we can be more public about what our policies are going to be. We can publish them online, which further deters people from entering our district that may think, oh, well, I can work here. No, you can't. I think there's another issue of students and families feeling safe enough to go to school that they won't be followed by ICE. I think we are going to have to depend on our staff and informing them about their rights and what our policies are going to be about how we can protect families in that way to know that the school is a safe place for them. I think also we're dealing with budget issues that cause us to not have full-time nurse staff in our schools. I think we should be focusing on those kind of safety issues as well. So while I do plan to keep safety at the top of mind in creating policies, I also want everyone to know that I'm a very big warrior and I want to put those policies more into action, as I think would, further benefit every student and staff member.
I'll try to be way quicker this time. So my background, I was a teacher. I taught special education inclusion in pre-alternative school. So I had to intervene in quite a few violent confrontations. Then I was a school administrator. We dealt with weapons in the school. I was a Title IX investigator and decision maker on multiple cases. So the idea of being safe in schools for teachers, for staff, and for students, and for visitors, and for families, and everybody involved is very front of mind, and something I have a lot of experience in. There's a couple of things recently that have come up that I think should be priorities. It should be larger conversations rather than reactive pieces. For instance, the bathrooms over at LHS versus Free State, right? We saw that article about the bathrooms being locked down. Somebody that's worked in a school will tell you that 8 out of 10, instances of discipline or bad behavior comes out of the bathroom, right? We have to do something about it. And yet, staff and students need to be able to access the bathroom when needed. So, I'm not saying, Lawrence High has the right answer or Free State has the right answer, but I'm saying that there needs to be some consistency and clarity and, conversations above the board on that. Same with cell phones and social media. I can't tell you how many of the issues that evolved into weapons or violence in the school issues started because of something on TikTok or Snapchat. I think we need to have a really serious conversation with families about the role of cell phones in their child's life as it pertains to school, and the fact that we have phones that work right there at the school, and we always have. I think also, we saw the walk-ins that happened last week regarding support professionals, transportation, food service, paraprofessionals, facilities, like everybody that is around our classrooms, besides our teachers and our students. They are the ones that are often asked to deal with these issues as they come up. I think we need to be, prioritizing that compensation, that hiring, that training, and that support, especially not just making it part of the job duties, but supporting throughout all the difficult things that they have to face during the day, because they're often the ones we're relying on to get that done. And that's more than a $50 an hour job. I do want to piggyback off of a couple of things that my peers and colleagues up here have said. I think that all of these priorities, all of these questions really come down to two kind of things. I think it comes down to listening to families, to teachers, to students. Kelly and Topher expanded on that way better than I could, but I think a little more proactive conversation and listening to the concerns that are coming up to be as a tip line for that purpose. But I think that's one thing we could do. And then a review of our facilities, like Shannon was talking about. I think so many of the issues that we experience could be resolved by paying attention to the actual buildings that our school is happening in. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so our next question, and we're going to start, I'll come down here because we're starting with Christopher. So let me go down here. Okay, if you are elected, 2 major political events will directly impact Kansas public schools during your term. What is your knowledge of and position about each of these 2 things? Okay, so 2 major political events that will directly impact Kansas public schools during your term if you're elected. And what's your knowledge of and position on these 2 things? So number 1, the proposed state constitutional amendment that would allow for the direct election of state Supreme Court justices, which Kansans will vote on in August 2026, if you in the audience are not aware of that. And then, so number 1 is the proposed state constitutional amendment that would allow for the direct election of state Supreme Court justices, which Kansans will vote on in August 2026. And then the second is the legislature's implementation of a new public school funding formula in 2027. So the second is the legislature's implementation of a new public school funding formula in 2027. We get all that, students? Yes? Okay, Christopher?
Thank you. it feels like a big change, like turning over how our constitutional democracy in Kansas functions requires more than just an election. To me, I think that I once heard and I believe that the authority in the Supreme Court rests in their opinions, that they spell it out and it is spelled out then over time. And so some institutional stability in that. But I haven't been keeping up on that a lot. As far as the school funding. So, I mean, again, here we have a thing that we will need to fight for. And we have time between now and then to get our army ready, right? To gather the troops. Right now they're running from the fight, right? The parents of Lawrence, Kansas, the decision makers of Lawrence, Kansas are leaving our school district. And so we will be ill prepared because I'm unaware of anyone with such a radical funding formula that they want to pay schools for students that don't attend. And that's where we're suffering right now. The thing we need to do is get back the 1,300 students that should still be in Lawrence Public Schools. That's $13 million a year. That's where this comes from, right? That's what this all comes down to, is we need this community to reinvigorate its faith in these public institutions so that we are prepared to take on this fight. Because as any of you who have known, who have organized through fights, doing it alone is too much. We need each other to be able to do it. And the people of Lawrence are unique. Lawrence is a unique community, no matter how much some of my opponents might try and convince you otherwise. We are wildly capable of sacrificing for meaning. We are in fact founded on the notion that we should leave our safety and go to the place where the fight is happening. And that's what we need to do. But right now, the fight we need to win is in the living rooms of Lawrence, Kansas. We have got to reconnect with our community so that we can have them believe in us enough to stand at our backs and fight. And that's the only thing that we can do right now to be able to change this funding formula. Asking politely, being civil to the legislature is not going to change anything. Leverage is what changes. When someone is trying to oppress you, when they are literally withholding money from our children, asking nicely, if it worked, it would have worked by now. So we need to be able to gather as a community to understand how to be a responsive public education system that is worth fighting for. And if we do that and we keep the evidence of how things like volunteer programs and extra staffing impact behavior and achievement, then we can have an evidence-based case that money will do our children good and it is owed them. And that's how we make these events happen.
All right, Molly.
Okay, so the first issue is about the
Constitutional amendment.
amendment we have to vote on in the primary.
Yeah.
You definitely need to vote on this. You don't want to directly elect your justices because that can be influenced directly by money. You don't want, for example, Elon Musk to buy the justices. We already do have a system of checks where every 2 years the justices are allowed to be retained. So we do already have a system for that. It's not something new. This particular amendment, which will be an August vote in the primary to get people not to vote in it because fewer people vote in it, is to try to directly elect those that may be for outside sources. So please vote for that, and also then vote for an important governor that would be able to correctly appoint justices and allow us to retain them if they were good. The second one has to do with the vouchers and any kind of tax credits, however you want to call it. I believe definitely that public money should stay in public schools. If we lose just a few students, it will decimate the public school budget. And that's not only for Lawrence, that's especially true for rural schools. So it doesn't have a place here. Vouchers are not something that we want at all. There are other important things that lots of people don't know about those sort of tax credits. Like, did you know that the public school in your district does help to pay for things like homeschool should you have an IEP? Did you know that private schools can say that you're not allowed to go, whether or not you got that tax credit based on their inability to help your particular student? Public school accepts everyone. So the public money that we're required to pay for taxes should definitely go to public schools so that we can equitably help all of our students.
I'll start with the justice, and I totally agree with Molly. If you allow the justices to be elected, then it becomes politicized, and we've seen across the country what happens with that kind of thing. And so, in its innate wisdom, the legislature has put it as a primary vote with the hope that people won't get out and vote because of that. But we've proven them wrong with the little abortion bill that came out. And so it has to be community grassroots. We have to speak out on this, and we have to be very, very vocal about why this is a problem and why it would continue to be a problem into the future. Because it's hard to change those laws once they've been amended. So I will be out canvassing as needed, as I did with the abortion bill, and will be trying to make sure that this doesn't happen. Lawrence is a great place to live because of the nature of the people who live here, who really do believe in freedom and believe in all of the ideals in the Constitution. So I know Lawrence will step up and do the right thing, but we do have places in Kansas we need to work on. So that's why these other people are here to help us with that. I do want to talk about public school funding formula and vouchers as well. I really am not a fan of the voucher system for all the reasons that Molly has already expanded on. I've done some reading. There's actually even a book about the public school funding formula in Kansas. There's a whole book about it, which I read, and the historian's shaking her head, so she knows it's not easy reading. You have to really, really, really read about it. But the reality is that if we are in Lawrence are not reaching all of the children and families that we need to find out why. There needs to be a community survey. We need to reach out to parents, to families, and find out why. And that's how you mend those fences and get the pupils back into the public schools. The other reality is the birth rate is decreasing. Children are 25% of our population, but 100% of our future. But in 5 years, they're going to be 22% of the population because the birth rate across the country is decreasing. So we have to also have public school funding that makes sense for the public schools. We are currently not funding special education. I love the governor, but she's wrong when she says we're fully funding education. We are not. We are not funding special education. As a mother of a child who has autism, I can tell you that you have to fight for all of those things in the class to get what they need. So without the resources, without the funding, the school district can't do it. So we have to be also cognizant of the cost. And we have that data. And I have to stop. Math.
That's great. To the question about the constitutional amendment allowing justices to be directly elected, I mean, I speak for most, and that's horrible. I honestly, I can't say for sure. 15 years ago, when things didn't look so bleak, and the climate was not as hostile, maybe it would have been worth the conversation. But we've seen how the larger Supreme Court has been weaponized, and that's not something that we want to allow, here. So I'm not a fan of that. It also, I think, brings the question of how do we promote political mobilization within our community. The primary numbers were better than they had been previously. They were unexpectedly better, and yet it's still a pittance compared to the amount of eligible voters. People have different opinions on what happened in the last, large federal election about people that stayed home and whatnot. So I think, we need to be asking how do we, in a nonpartisan way, but enact political mobilization and education around voting. Something that every group that's putting on this event here today is trying to do. But how do we do that to get more people out, to get a better picture of what people actually want? To the question about the new funding formula in 2027, I won't lie to you, I have limited knowledge on that. Vouchers have been, an awful idea from the inception. I do think in terms of school funding with, our drop in enrollment and, as you said, the birth rate declining, this is not a problem that's going away. One thing that I've appreciated is that we do have somebody who does a lot of state house advocacy and helps to smooth those waters here on our board. I think another area that we need to explore is having a deeper conversation with the city, with the county, and with the university. I work for the university, have a lot of great relationships, a lot of respect. I mean, that's where I met my wife. That's where I went to school. And yet, we saw a few weeks ago what happened with athletics funding and tax incentives on the back of a $300 million gift. The institution I work for earned a $50 million gift. We know that the tax relationship between the university and the city is not how most of us would like it to be. We know that the city is having its own financial troubles. I think that rather than asking everybody to fight on their own in terms of mill levies and school funding and everything else, that it needs to be part of a larger conversation about how everybody is contributing to the problem and how we can work together to solve it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start first with proposed primary around the choice of judges. The issue truly comes down to one of fighting and staying involved in not only in our community but statewide. That the reality of Lawrence can't make the difference. So what we have to do is organize, collaborate with other communities, try to get more people to understand every right you have today, you can lose it on a judge's decision. So the reality is it becomes very important that we band together as communities and say, okay, what we really need is to stay where we're at. We need judges appointed and voted on whether we retain them if they function as they should. As to the school funding issue, we deal with that and hear a lot about it as we're sitting at the board table and do a lot of reading about it. My major issue is around special education and the lack of funding thereof. The reality here in Lawrence, in the Lawrence School District, we spend roughly around $14 million in special ed out of our general budget, which means that's money that we get that would go to all other students that the state is supposed to be reimbursing us for, that we no longer have. When we look at problems with our ability to pay staff, that just imagine what 14 million would add to that and increase our ability to do that. I worry about vouchers. The reality for me is that what vouchers simply do is they remove funding from public schools. That's what they're intended to do. It dilutes the funding for our school district.
Okay.
I would like to write a dissertation on this, so I'm going to try to be really brief. The absolutely direct election of Supreme Court justices in Kansas is bad for public education, period. Like that's true. My colleagues have well articulated that. It's also why it's so important that school boards are nonpartisan, and that we are acting on the behalf of what's best for the student, what's best for the district, what's best for the teachers in the building. And I have collaborated with 13 different board members. Some of them Republican, some of them Democrat. I am not a Republican. And I'm telling you, we came together because we had shared values. It does not happen when you turn things partisan. We get ugly very fast, and we need to do what's best for kids. So that's absolutely one of the reasons I'm running again, because of what's happening in the federal government. And I do not believe we can any longer trust our Department of Education to ensure the civil rights of the students in our community, and we are going to have to do it together collectively around the funding formula. So everyone here has spoke a bit about the vouchers, and I agree that that's a concern. When I came on the board, it was 10 years after the Brownback years. It's also the 10 years where we saw a lot of growth in enrollment. And in fact, we should have been flush. We were not, because of block grant funding. So we know that the funding formula is essential to how we can achieve the equity issues in the first question that we asked each other. So if wages are part of equity, that is one of the most important things that we do as a district. If we want to see a headline that doesn't say that our paraeducators are getting a 54-cent raise, we cannot disavow the importance of what's happening in Topeka last week, which, by the way, my colleague Shannon Kimball gets up at 8 o'clock in the morning and goes to bed, spending all of her day in Topeka working on the behalf of making sure that we have the best funding formula we can possibly have in Kansas. If enrollment is being impacted by whatever the issue, if it's by the declining birth rate, if it is by decisions that we've made in this district, including closing schools. Nobody has said that. I know it's hanging over the head. That is an important thing, and it had an impact on this district. If it is because of COVID, and it is, all of those things together, we have to do things to attract families to this district. And that includes, if we have a funding formula, increasing the number and opportunities for early education in this community. It is something that the chamber knows we need. It is something that families know we need. And it is something that gets people into our district early on. So that is something that I hope to accomplish in the next, if you all let me come back. I would very much like to work on that, and I'm probably going to continue to work on that regardless. 90% of Kansans attend public education, in case they don't give me 30 more seconds. If you leave for any reason whatsoever for today, my big ask to you is that you go out and champion how amazing our schools are. I have the opportunity in my job to work with districts across the state, and I'm telling you what, Lawrence Public Schools was a fun place for me to raise my children.
Shannon?
Thank you. Where to start on this? I do spend my days all day, every day in my professional work on these very issues. And it is one of the things that I think makes me particularly impactful and effective as a school board member here in USD 497. I am a passionate advocate for public education, and I understand very deeply what the issues are that are behind the two political events that are going to be coming our way. Direct election of judges, we do not want it. We do not want our Supreme Court politicized. And you know why it's on the ballot? It's not just because of the abortion vote. It is the way that the supermajority in Topeka believes that they will be able to take control of the school finance formula. Because the Supreme Court has been the one saying, you must follow the Constitution. The formula must be adequate, it must be equitable, it must provide a suitable public education that allows students to meet a certain set of really important criteria for their development and their growth into adulthood. And as long as we have a nonpartisan Supreme Court that is going to say those things, the legislature can't just run roughshod over the school finance formula and do what they want, which is to substantially decrease their commitment to our public schools. So that is absolutely critical, and I do hope that you make sure that other people understand that, because this is a fight for the future of our public education system in Kansas. On the topic of the school finance formula, our current formula sunsets at the end of June 2027. There will be a bill passed in the 2027 legislature. Some of us are advocating that we need to renew our formula that is constitutional and is equitable and adequately funded. There are people in the legislature who want to throw it out and start over. And that would not be a good thing for our students in USD 497. I've been a parent in this district since 2010. I'm still a parent in this district. None of my 3 children have attended a public school in Kansas that was fully constitutionally funded. It is 2025. We collectively, as communities and advocates across the state, have been fighting this fight for well over 25 years in Kansas, frankly. Our base state aid is 32%. I need like 5 more minutes, Lois. Come on. 32% behind what it should be in terms of inflation. Special education is funded. We transfer $14 million a year. We are paying 48% of our special education costs out of our local dollars because the state is not meeting their commitment. The skill and expertise that I have is going to be critical to this, and I am going to keep inviting all of you into this advocacy with me, because I can't do it alone. The 7 of us on the Board of Education can't do it alone. Our leadership in Lawrence Public Schools can't do it alone. We need all of you. Thank you, and I hope I can gain your vote in November.
All right, so I was an advocate for that question in part because Women for Kansas's big issue in 2026 will be vote no on the constitutional amendment. We're already planning for it now for all the reasons that the candidates said. As Molly said, it politicizes our courts, and this has direct impact on school funding. It was the state Supreme Court that argued that we need to have a constitutionally fully funded schools, even though we have the special education problems that we talked about here. So start telling your friends. Vote no signs will start to pop up next year. Start thinking about this issue. Another thing I want to say is thank you to our co-hosts, League of Women Voters, and the Lawrence Branch, the NAACP. I want to thank you for attending. And like we said, there's going to be time for you to talk to the candidates. They're going to have table space. You can get access to materials, ask some of your personal questions. This video for this event, like I said, will be on the Women for Kansas YouTube channel later this week if you'd like to share it or use it. But of course, we need to talk about voting. So the election is on November 4. Okay, it's on November 4. If you have not registered to vote in Kansas, you can register through October 14. Okay, October 14. In-person voting in Lawrence starts October 15, okay, the next day. And if you'd like to learn more about where to vote, how to register, etc., go to DGCOKS, so DGCOKS.gov, that's our county government website, and click on voting and elections. So thank you very much for coming. Oh,